Welcome back to ASTR, the bi-weekly video magazine of the General Conference Office of Archives, Statistics and Research. Thanks for joining us as we bring together the best of the Adventist Church's past and present in order to inspire for the future. In this episode, we start with This Week in Adventist History. I share stories about Adventists from Japan, Germany, Liberia, and Denmark. Then Ashlee Chism shares about some of the priceless records we have in the General Conference archives, before Elizabeth Henry shares what we are doing to digitize those records and thus to both conserve them and make them more widely available in digital form. Dr. Dragoslava Santrak shares another inspiring story of missionaries from the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists, and we end with the regular statistical nugget from our data collection and publication team. You can find research findings on many different topics relating to the Adventist Church at adventistresearch.info. Sign up for the ASTR Research newsletter, explore our blog, and read original research reports. All available at adventistresearch.info. That's adventistresearch.info. Welcome to This Week in Adventist History. On April 30, 1898, a baptism was conducted in the suburbs of Tokyo in the Meguro River, the first Seventh-day Adventist baptismal service in Japan. Among those baptized was a young man, Hizu Kuniya, who later became the first Seventh-day Adventist convert in Japan to be ordained as an Adventist minister and was a delegate to the 1909 General Conference session in Tacoma Park. Kuniya, who you see here, went on to establish the first Seventh-day Adventist local churches in many Japanese cities, and he was imprisoned for his faith during World War II. Hizu Kuniya died in 1962, 11 weeks short of his 90th birthday. You can read more about him in the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists at encyclopedia.adventist.org. That's encyclopedia.adventist.org. Also on April 30, but 32 years later, April 30, 1930, the first Adventist baptism in the country of Liberia took place. 6 years earlier, L.F. Langford, a British missionary, and Ernst Flammer, a German missionary, had been sent to open mission work in Liberia, and they found a suitable site at Seyan, where they opened the Palmberg Mission Station. Langford moved elsewhere, and in 1928, Ernst Flammer went back to Germany, where he married Joanna Pfalzner, before returning with Joanna to Liberia. In 1929, a boarding school opened at the mission, headed by a new German missionary, Karl Nolzer. These several years of work were the precursor to the historic baptism of 4 Liberians at Seyan. One of them, Willie Helbig, later became the first Liberian ordained to gospel ministry. Today there are 29,000 Seventh-day Adventists in Liberia, the fruit of that first baptism 93 years ago. You can read more about Ernst Flammer at encyclopedia.adventist.org. On May 1, 1918, the Danish pastor Steen Emil Marius Rasmussen, who you see here, was called to the Pacific Press in California as editor of several foreign language papers. Steen Rasmussen and his wife Anna had been called from Denmark to the United States 5 years earlier in 1913 to work for the North American Division's Foreign Language Department, which he then headed from January 1915. After moving to Pacific Press in 1918, Rasmussen edited the Hungarian Signs of the Times and the Danish-Norwegian language paper Missionæren. In 1920, Steen and Anna returned to Denmark, where Steen took up responsibilities as departmental secretary of the Sabbath School, Education, Young People's Missionary Volunteers, and Home Missionary Departments of the Scandinavian Union Conference. In late 1924, the Rasmussens moved to Bern, Switzerland, where Steen took over as Young People's Missionary Volunteer Secretary for the European Division. He became known as the Friend of the Youth. From 1927, he also headed the division's Home Missionary Department. In 1936, Rasmussen was called to Washington, D.C. in the United States to lead the Home Missionary Department of the General Conference. Rasmussen threw himself wholeheartedly into his work, as he had done in every administrative position he held for the church since 1911, and he exhausted himself. Steen Rasmussen died of a heart attack on March 5, 1941, aged only 52 years old. And you can also read more about him at encyclopedia.adventist.org. That's encyclopedia.adventist.org. And that was this week in Adventist History.
The General Conference Archives and the Riebach Memorial Library each have a variety of records, all capturing events and interactions within the history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Some of the earliest materials we have are those in a folder of delegate credentials for the Second General Conference session held from May 18th to May 21st, 1864. These credentials were issued to John N. Andrews, William S. Ingram, James Harvey, Joseph H. Wagner, Joseph Clark, and Washington Morse. Let's look at a single set of credentials, a single record, and see what stories it may have to tell. Two men wrote a short note on a palm-sized piece of paper on April 17, 1864, authorizing John N. Andrews to represent the New York and Pennsylvania State Conference of Seventh-day Adventists at the General Conference session. The credentials read, "This is to certify that we authorize Elder J. N. Andrews to act as delegate and Gen Conf of the SDA assembled at Battle Creek, Mich., May 18, 1864, to represent the New York and Pennsylvania State Conference and transact business for the same. A. Lamphere, N. Fuller, Wellsville, April 17, 1864. A note to the side of the two names notes that Lamphere and Fuller were the CONCOM, or the Conference Committee of the New York and Pennsylvania Conference. Of course, one story that the record points to is that of John N. Andrews. You can read Gil Valentine's Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventist article on Andrews at encyclopedia.adventist.org. But what about the stories of those who authorize Andrews's credentials? Avery Lamphere was in his late 40s. Although born in Rhode Island in 1815, Lamphere grew up and lived in New York. His family were Seventh-day Baptists, and at age 13 he joined his local church, as did his two brothers Ethan and Nathan. In 1851, Avery was made deacon of his local church, a position he held until 1858, when he became a Sabbath-keeping Adventist. He was soon made a deacon, and in 1863 he became a local elder. Lamphere was elected in late 1863 to be the second president of the New York Conference, which had been founded the previous year. In 1864, he had become a ministerial licentiate, and at the third constituency meeting of the New York and Pennsylvania Conference, as it had become, held in September 1864 and attended by James and Ellen White, Avery was re-elected as president and recognized by the conference as a preacher to labor in the cause as Providence may open the way. Avery Lamphere was president of the New York and Pennsylvania Conference until his untimely death in 1866. On his way to that year's conference constituency meeting, Lamphere was thrown from his wagon and badly injured. Nearby strangers took him in and cared for him at a nearby house, where he lingered for 9 days before succumbing to fever and his injuries on October 5, 1866. Nathan Fuller is the other man who signed John N. Andrews' credentials to the 1864 General Conference, and Fuller was elected to the conference's presidency in the wake of Lamphere's death. Brought up in the Methodist Episcopal Church, Fuller became a Sabbath-keeping Adventist in 1857 and soon was preaching the Advent message. He was even a delegate to the very first General Conference session in 1863. However, within years of becoming New York, Pennsylvania Conference president, Fuller had what is called a moral fall, the result of which was that he had his ministerial credentials removed and was disfellowshipped. You can read more about Nathan Fuller's life in Brian Strayer's article about him in the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists at encyclopedia.adventist.org. The Archives is happy to preserve these credentials as well as many other records, and to share the stories that such records have to tell.
The online archive has thousands of materials on the site. Here, you see just some of the digitized content, which amounts to nearly 2 million pages of content. Have you ever wondered how we make these things available? The Office of Archives, Statistics, and Research have been scanning records since the early 2000s. The scanning project and its process has evolved over the years. At its starts, black and white scanners were used to scan records, including General Conference session bulletins and the church's leading historical periodicals, such as the Review and Herald and Signs of the Time. Today, ASTR primarily uses 3 types of scanners to scan the records in our holdings. The first type of scanner ASTR uses, the one that is used most often, is a high-input, high-speed scanner. There are 3 such scanners in use in the department. This type of scanner is used to scan loose-leaf documents or duplicate copies of bound documents that have been guillotined to fit in the scanner. It can scan both sides of the pages on one pass and supports a variety of paper sizes, as small as a receipt and as big as an A3 paper size, that is 11.7 by 16.5 inches. Files scanned using the high-speed scanner have an integrated process that imports the final record into the official ASTR Digital Archives repository, including all the metadata from the software used to manage the physical records. This ensures that we have one version of metadata for each record scanned. The second type of scanner used is a flatbed. This scanner is used for loose-leaf records which are too fragile to go through the high-input, high-speed scanners, and also for photos. Files scanned using the flatbed scanners are manually imported to the official ASTR repository and metadata added at the time of import. The final scanner used in ASTR is a book scanner. As the name suggests, this scanner is primarily used to scan bound books, including pamphlets, diaries, and naturally, books. Like the flatbed scanner, files scanned using the book scanners are manually imported to the official ASTR repository, and metadata is added at the time of import. The current focus of ASTR scanning projects is to facilitate ease of use, internal research, and preservation of materials, though we do continue to publish material to the online archives. This has been a look at how scanning is done in ASTR.
I am excited to share another story from the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventist, or ASDA. This is just one of nearly 4,000 stories available at encyclopedia.adventist.org. For more than 3 decades, Alfonso Nils Anderson and his wife Maite Landis Anderson were missionaries to the Japanese people, first in Japan, then in the Japanese community in the Philippines, where they survived 3 years in the harsh conditions of World War II internment camps. In 1913, Alfonso graduated from Union College in Lincoln, Nebraska, United States. The same year, he and classmate Maite Landis were married. After heading the mission station in Hiroshima from 1915 to 1917, Alfonso did editorial work with the Japanese periodicals Toki no Shirushi, Signs of the Times, and Shimei no Otozure, Tidings of the Message. His additional roles included Home Missionary Secretary and Publishing Secretary for the Japan Union from 1919 to 1921, Teacher of Bible and History at Japan Mission Training School 1921 to 1927, Director of Tohoku Mission 1928 to 1934, and Bible teacher at Japan Union College from 1934 to 1936. a fluent Japanese linguist, the mild-mannered, nearsighted missionary once had to calm an angry mob that had been inflamed by wild rumors accusing Koreans of poisoning wells in the aftermath of the 1923 Tokyo earthquake, and was bent on attacking a Korean worker at the Adventist Press. The Andersons moved to the Philippines in 1937 with the assignment of seeking converts among the large Japanese community in Davao on the southern island of Mindanao. In 1942, Alfonso and Maite were interned after the conquest of the American colony by the Japanese army. 2 years later, they were transferred to a harsher environment at the large internment camp created at Santo Tomas University in Manila. Though forbidden by their captors from watching the skies, they were aware of the aerial dogfights which came ever closer to Manila. Alfonso was near death, weighing 70 pounds, when the camp was liberated by troops of the American 1st Cavalry Division on February 3, 1945. He was hospitalized, but Maite was among the emaciated prisoners cheering General Douglas MacArthur, who visited on February 7th, even as the battle for Manila continued. Later it was learned that Japanese general orders to camp officials called for executing all prisoners if threatened by American forces. Alfonso emerged from this experience permanently weakened, but still deeply in love with Japan and Japanese culture. After retirement in 1946, he carried on quiet personal evangelism among Japanese Americans. He enjoyed teaching astronomy to young pathfinders and became a skilled amateur poet. The following poem captures something of the spirit that animated his commitment to the cause of Christ. Miracle. I ask for neither name, nor niche in corridor of fame, nor thrill of sense, nor touch of gold, nor laurels in earth's game. I only trust my Lord all-wise, by miracle of grace, will grant a faith enriched by love, and then to see his face. Alfonso Anderson died March 16, 1958 in Hinsdale, Illinois. Maite Landis Anderson passed away 6 years later on April 27, 1964 in North Sacramento, California. I believe that one day Alfonso and Maite will see Jesus' face at the resurrection of the righteous at Jesus' second coming. I pray that you and I too are in that great multitude comprising God's faithful people of all times on that glorious day. If you want to learn about other Adventist missionaries and be inspired by their stories, then please check the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventist online at encyclopedia.adventist.org. That's encyclopedia.adventist.org.
Welcome to the latest statistical nugget from the ASTR Data Collection and Publication team. For this episode's statistical nugget, we will talk about Chart 11 in the 2022 Annual Statistical Report. Chart 11, found on page 7 of the 2022 ASR, details changes in world membership over 5 years, from 2016 to 2021. Changes are caused by accessions, losses, and deaths. Accessions are the net total of baptisms, professions of faith, and rebaptisms of former members. Losses are the aggregate of those dropped from membership, those registered as missing, and of negative adjustments, which typically arise from membership reviews. In this chart, you will see that net losses rose from 564,587 to 789,888 in 2021, which is a 40% rise. This is mostly due to ongoing membership reviews. However, only time will tell if losses continue to trend upward after the program of membership reviews currently being implemented around the world come to a close. In addition, deaths also increased by 27%, from 64,989 in 2020 to 82,317. This is likely due to the unfortunate repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic. This trend upwards was anticipated, as a true impact of the pandemic on our worldwide church membership would not have been reflected until our data in 2021. For more information on world statistics of the Adventist Church, go to AdventistStatistics.org. That's AdventistStatistics.org.
That's it for another episode. Thank you for being with us, and please join us again next time as we bring you the most interesting and inspiring Adventist content from the past and from today.